What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the third-person action RPG tutorial series, we are going to be going over double jumping or jumping multiple times before landing and touching the ground. There's two main ways that you can handle this in Unreal Engine, and that is using the built-in functionality or creating our own system. I'm going to go over both because they're both very simple. I do recommend that we create our own system so we have full control over this, but the character movement component is also an option, so keep that in mind. What you see in this example right now is custom, so I'm using launch character to actually execute my jump, so it is bringing me into the air when I press the jump key or jump button. If I press it twice before I touch the ground, I can double jump. Right now it's the same animation anytime I'm jumping or falling, so I don't actually have any sort of indication other than the forces being applied. If I press jump more than that, I don't jump. I can only jump the specified number of times, so if I put 3, I could jump 3 times without touching the ground. Anytime I land on any surface, I will be able to jump again. I'm going to be covering in today's episode. If you're interested in getting caught up in this series before checking this out, you can see how we've done armor, dialogue choices, enemy targeting, and more. If you're not interested in the entire series and you just want to know how we've done the double jumping, I do recommend you watch the first episode on enhanced movement because it will give you an idea of how we handle our movement states in general. So I'll go ahead and link that right here in the top right corner. This is not required. You don't need to watch this episode to perform double jumps in your game, but just be aware that is something that you can do to improve your movement in your third-person action RPG. With all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing everything in the code today. So we can go to Visual Studio, our third-person tutorial character.h, and scroll down to where we make our variables. We're going to be adding 3 variables today. So 2 integers and a float. So I'm scrolling down to my integers, and I have 2 variables in here. I have my jump count and my max jump count. So the first one here, jump count, is the number of times the character has jumped without landing. If we can jump only once without landing, as soon as we jump, if we reach 1 jump count, we can't jump again until we land. If we can jump 3 times before landing, then jump count starts at 0. Every time we press the jump input, it increments until we reach 3, and then we can no longer jump. So to make this, I've set it as a U property of edit anywhere blueprint read write, so we can edit it and access it in the blueprint, and then I've given it a category of jump, just to easily find this within the blueprints. This isn't technically required for today's episode because we're doing everything in code, but this will allow you to access it within the blueprint if you need to. Then we have our int max jump count. So this is the maximum number of jumps the character can perform without landing. This is what we're checking against every time we see if we can perform a jump or not. So if we're in the air and we press the jump button, can we jump again? If our jump count is less than the max jump count, we can. If not, we can't. This is also U property of edit anywhere blueprint read write with a category of jump, and again that's int max jump count. The other variable we need today is a float, and specifically this is going to be our jump velocity variable here. The vertical velocity at which the character will jump. Now the character has the ability to jump in Unreal Engine if they derive from the A character class that Unreal Engine already has. When we want to make our own jump though, we need to supply a custom value to make our character jump, and this is going to be this jump velocity variable here. So U property, edit anywhere, blueprint read write with a category of jump, and it's a float called jump velocity. This way we have full customization of how much velocity we want to apply when jumping. You can think of this like your height, but it's not going to work that way. When we call the launch character function that we will be using later in this episode, it's really using a velocity to apply that launch. It's not the height. However, a higher velocity will equate to a higher height. Once we've made these 3 variables, we want to go to where our functions are and we want to override a new function today. So I put it in my protected space here, but it doesn't matter where you put it. Just make sure you're making a new function in here. And this is going to be overriding the landed function that the character has. So landed is another function that the A character class has, which is Unreal's base character class. And we have access to this because our third-person tutorial character code class derives from the A character class. So virtual void landed, in parentheses, const f hit result ampersand for reference hit override. We're just overriding the landed function. This whole section right here, this is the function name, these are the parameters. So we have to follow those if we're going to be overriding the function. And then virtual and override just mean we're overriding this function. Once we have this function and our 3 variables, we can go into the code. First things first, let's set our variables in the constructor here. So here's our constructor where we set the default values, and we want to set our jump count and max jump count. By default, the jump count should be 0 because we're not spawning this character while they're jumping. They're spawning not jumping, so they default to 0 jump count. Max jump count is how many jumps we want to allow this character to perform without landing. So I'm going to set it to 2, give them a double jump. You could allow upgrades influence this, so you could have them upgrade their jump count and they can jump 3, 4, 5, 10 times. We also want to set our jump velocity. I'm setting it to 500.0f because I think that's a good velocity, but you might have to play around with this value. 500 should be pretty close to what you're used to already from the regular jump function. After we have these variables, we want to go down to our start jump function. So here's start jump. Now directly above this, I've added the landed function. Keeping these close together just makes it easy to find them in the file without searching for them. So void a third person tutorial character, : landed, const f hit result ampersand hit. So first thing I'm doing in here is calling the parent, or just the character class's landed function. So super : landed, passing in the hit parameter that it requires. So perform the character's logic upon land. For our custom logic though, we want to reset the jump counter. So anytime we land on any object, we want to reset our jump counter so that next time we jump, we can double jump. So jump count equals 0. Now in start jump, we want to do the rest of our logic today. So we only jump if the menu is not open, we're not dead, and we're not rolling or interacting with an NPC. None of this is changing today. This is from earlier episodes in the series. Of course, you don't need this if you're not following the series and you're just trying to double jump. You can skip these if statements. Start jump, however, is a function that we call when we press an input. And before, we were just calling super : jump, or calling the parent's jump function. I've commented that out today to disable it. You could remove it entirely if you want, or just leave it commented so that we're not using it. That's perfectly fine. Then instead, I've added my own logic in here. So if the character has jumped less than the maximum number of times without landing, jump count is less than max jump count, then we want to perform the jump. I'm doing this with a launch character function call. So launch character basically just applies velocity on the given axis, and it can override the other values that the character has. So other movement that the character has on the X and Y, or other movement that they have on the Z axes. So launch character, and it takes in an F vector for our velocities. So F vector of 0.0f, 0.0f. So X and Y are not affected. In our world, the Z axis is the height. We know this because Unreal's coordinate system, but you can also check it right here in the bottom left of your level in the editor. Z is the vertical axis here. This blue line on this graph is the Z axis. That's our height. So we want our velocity to be on the Z axis to perform a jump. We don't want to affect the X or Y axes in this case. Then the other two parameters are if it should override the forces and velocity on the X and Y axes for this first one, which is false because we're not applying any velocity to these axes. But the second parameter is if we should override the velocity on the Z axis. This one's going to be true. So I'm overriding things like gravity or other upward or downward movement with this jump velocity. You could leave it false if you want, and then those other forces would affect how much your character jumps up when you press this button, but I wanted it to override the velocity on the Z-axis. This way we always get the same jump amount no matter what we're doing. Once we've launched the character, we can assume that they have jumped, so we want to increase the jump counter, ++ jump count. At this point you can go back into the editor and test it, and it will work as expected. That's method 1. There's another way that you can apply multiple jumps without making your own custom system. So in the base character blueprint or in your code class, there is a variable for the character that is called jump count, or jump max count rather. This is the maximum number of jumps the character can perform. It defaults to 1. If you didn't want to implement the system I showed you today, you could change this to 2 or whatever value. And don't do anything that we did in start jumping right here. Just leave super : jump uncommented, so you're doing the regular jump function, and your character will jump twice before touching the ground. While this works, if you have a custom system like we implemented in today's episode, you have full control over what happens here. So for more sophisticated mechanics and movement abilities like we're going to want and have in our game, I prefer the custom system. It is up to you ultimately, so just be aware that that is an option to you. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I really hope it helped you, and I hope it taught you how you can use double jumps in your game. If this video helped you, please subscribe. If you're interested in supporting the channel further, then please check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, or Discord subscriptions, where you can get perks along the way and support the channel. Also want to say a huge thank you to everyone who already does and has done this. Thank you guys so much. If you ran into any problems while following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description and I would be happy to help you out with that. Anyway guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.